Hello and welcome. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Gautam Roy, and coming up over the next hour, a top UN official says current levels of aid to Gaza is just crumbs as 10 trucks crossed Rafah on Friday, stresses on a ceasefire to allow for meaningful help. The United Nations General Assembly is set to take up a resolution later tonight calling for ceasefire after EU leaders urge a pause in the fighting. Former Chinese Mayor Li Keqiang dies of a heart attack. The 68-year-old was sidelined in recent years by President Xi Jinping. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurates Asia's largest telecom forum, Indian Mobile Congress, says India will lead the world in 6G rollout. First up, Israeli forces backed by fighter jets and drones carried out a second ground raid into Gaza, striking dozens of Hamas hideouts. Israel's military has said that it took out a top Hamas commander in an airstrike. The conflict between Israel and Hamas, which began on the 7th of October, is now in its 21st day. The Israeli military has confirmed that 229 people are being held hostage in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Forces released aerial footage on Friday of what it said was several targeted strikes on Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip. The IDF said it employed ground forces, fighter jets and UAVs to conduct a targeted raid in the central Gaza Strip area, identifying and striking what it said was several Hamas anti-tank missile launch sites, military command and control centers, as well as Hamas terrorists. Now, amid the escalating war, 8 more trucks carrying food, medicine and water are expected to enter the Gaza Strip. The senior UN official said that negotiations have been taking place with Israel in a bid to secure more humanitarian crossings in the enclave. However, there is still no agreement on getting fuel into Gaza.
We have seen some deliveries of trucks starting. They started on the 21st of October. We have gotten in approximately 74 trucks. We're expecting another 8 or so today. Just to put things in comparison, there were 450 trucks going into Gaza before October 7th. And that was under some very, very strict restrictions in terms of goods being able to get into Gaza. We are down now to approximately 12.
Now, this comes as Israel said it has no interest in war with any other forces other than Hamas. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said Israeli soldiers are waging war on the southern front against Hamas and are prepared for any development in the north. Talking about ground operations in Gaza, Gallant said it will come when conditions are right.
Our goal is to win the war and return the hostages. The maneuver will come, and the day it will happen is not far off. It will happen when the conditions are right in order to strike Hamas organization, and after we complete our task with fire, when this will happen, you will see and understand its power.
Now, DD India's Amripal Singh, who is covering the Israel-Hamas conflict, reports from Jerusalem, analyzing Israel's latest ground invasion plans and the ramifications it could lead to.
It's almost 3 weeks that the war has started, and Israel has been consistently saying our forces will go in and finish the Hamas, but they haven't done so far. Why is Israel not doing it? Why is it still pounding Hamas through mainly aerial bombing? There could be 3 reasons for it. One, it wants to weaken the Hamas infrastructure considerably before it goes in. And that can be achieved only by aerial bombing and artillery fire from the Israeli ground. The second and the most important reason weighing on Benjamin Netanyahu's government and his war cabinet's mind would be the fate of the hostages. According to Israeli admission, Hamas is still holding more than 220 hostages, many of them, actually more than half of them, foreign nationals. When sentiments are running high, are ruffled, Israel has to factor that in, that if they go in, what if Hamas starts killing the hostages one by one, which includes elderly, women, children, soldiers? When all those images beam on television screens, what effect would it have on the psychology or the psyche of the common Israeli who is already not only angry, traumatized, but hurt and calls for reprisal and retribution and does not want to see any more deaths? The third and the most important reason is that going in is easier said than done. When Israeli forces go in, what will they encounter? They will encounter a Hamas on the rooftops, blended in with the civilians, booby-trapped buildings, rubble, which is booby-trapped, tunnels, 1,300 tunnels with a 500-kilometer network, some of them opening both in Israel and in Egypt. Will Israeli forces be able to get in without considerable damage to themselves? That's a question that would be weighing on the mind of the IDF or the Israeli Defense Forces. With cameraman SP Dubey, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India in Jerusalem.
Meanwhile, the US has imposed sanctions against people and organizations linked to the Hamas in an effort to cut off funding for the Palestinian terror group. These sanctions include targeting a Hamas official in Iran and members of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard. The new sanctions highlight Iran's role in providing financial, logistical and operational support to Hamas. The Pentagon, meanwhile, has said that 900 additional US troops are heading to the Middle East to bolster air defenses and protect US personnel amid a surge in attacks in the region by Iran-affiliated groups.
As part of our efforts to deter a broader conflict and further bolster U.S. force protection capabilities, I can confirm that since our initial force posture announcement, approximately 900 troops have subsequently deployed or are in the process of deploying to the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility. These include forces that have been on prepare to deploy orders and which are deploying from the continental United States. Deployed and deploying units include a terminal high-altitude area defense battery from Fort Bliss, Texas, Patriot batteries from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Patriot and Avenger batteries from Fort Liberty, North Carolina, and associated air defense headquarters elements from Fort Bliss and Fort Cavados, Texas. While I won't talk specific deployment locations for these forces, I can confirm that they are not going to Israel and that, again, they are intended to support regional deterrence efforts and further bolster U.S. force protection capabilities.
The 193 members of the United Nations General Assembly are expected to vote on the Israel-Gaza war on Friday, but as an observer rather than a member, Palestine will not have a say. Jordan, acting on behalf of Arab countries, has proposed a General Assembly resolution calling, among other things, for a humanitarian ceasefire after the smaller, more powerful UN Security Council failed to take action despite the rising death toll from Israel's continued bombardments. The Palestinian Foreign Minister also addressed the UN Security Council at a special session this week, but as a non-member observer state, Palestine is not able to participate in the same way as full UN member states. Multiple fires were seen burning at the border between Israel and Lebanon on Friday as well, as tensions between the two nations continued to deepen. The United Nations Peacekeeping Force is working with Lebanese authorities to extinguish the fires that have spread for several kilometers in southern Lebanon, triggered by gunfire along the border with Israel. And still to come up on DD India News are: European Union leaders are meeting in Brussels to discuss migration and EU's economic competitiveness and other issues, including the Israel-Hamas conflict. Former Chinese Premier Li Keqiang has died at the age of 68 of a heart attack. Official Chinese media calls it a huge loss for the nation. And EU leaders have also expressed unwavering support for Ukraine in its fight against Russia, despite some division over funding the battle.
Israel women luminaries are going to share their experiences, their stories.
How to become a scientist, how to do what to do for the future. They're thinking about all those things.
Sky is not the limit, that is what we have proven now. Now we have to go beyond the sky.
Develop our curiosity. Try to learn the science from the nature.
With the Gaganyaan mission and the upcoming future missions to Mars landing and other things, your people's interaction is really required.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy. Now, European Union leaders on Friday will be discussing migration and EU's economic competitiveness and hold a Euro summit. Tough talks between leaders on Thursday eventually produced a common line on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Meanwhile, EU leaders have reached agreement on the Middle East in a compromise text agreed after hours of discussions. Heads of state and government from EU's 27 members declared that the EU reiterates the importance of ensuring the protection of all civilians at all times in line with international humanitarian law and deplores all loss of civilian life. The leaders also said that they are concerned about deteriorating humanitarian conditions in Gaza and called for aid, including humanitarian corridors and pauses for humanitarian needs. In a concession to Spain, new wording was added to the final text that the European Council supports the holding of an international peace conference soon. Let's now take you across to DD India's Alex Kadir joining us from Brussels. Alex, good evening. Now, yesterday the EU leaders stopped short of calling for ceasefire on the Israel-Hamas conflict. They sought a pause. Now, does that remain their position even now, considering the UNGA is holding its own vote today calling for a ceasefire?
Yeah, it will remain the European position. The fact that these 27 countries were able to come together and agree a common position has been difficult enough. That will not change in the next few hours, irrespective of what the United Nations does. What is clear is that it is a common pressure. There is pressure from the UN, there's pressure from the EU for Israel to at least scale down. That's how one EU official described it to me, scale down their action in Gaza. Now, this summit of the European Council, the European 27 leaders, has just ended. As you said, they have called for humanitarian pauses and humanitarian corridors to be rolled out in Gaza, allowing that aid to flow in. But again, the EU officials behind the scenes saying, look, Israel will listen to this because it's clear that there is a growing international pressure from the European allies, from the United States, and perhaps soon from the United Nations as well, that Israel needs to be careful in its response because its allies want to see that it stays within the confines of international law. So the clear message from those European leaders, there was some division. Spain, most notably, really wanted to call it a ceasefire. That's why the meeting went late into the night yesterday, before the conclusions were agreed. Germany, I should say, Germany saying, look, we don't necessarily need to ask for restraint. Israel is a democracy that respects international law. But that common position agreed. Humanitarian pauses have been called for, as have humanitarian corridors.
Okay. And what are the other key deliberations that the EU leaders are holding? Because have they been able to build consensus over the funding of Ukraine's fight against Russia, or has that been difficult as well?
Well, there's certainly a consensus to continue to support Ukraine. That is very clear across the board. Two member states, most notably Hungary, who's been leading the charge against some of that support, are still blocking some of the bigger payments. But there is an agreement that in the next EU long-term budget, or at least the changed EU long-term budget, there will be money for Ukraine. That is a guarantee. Now, the question is where it will come from and how it will manifest itself. How will this money, will it be in loans? Will it be in direct payments? Will it be in military aid? That's all being debated. There was a worry, for example, that Slovakia would be another thorn with its new prime minister, who said it would end arms deliveries to Ukraine. Well, EU officials behind the scenes saying Slovakia ending its arms deliveries to Ukraine makes no difference. They had already given everything they had. So a consensus, certainly among the leaders, that the support for Ukraine will continue. They wanted to make it very clear, in fact, that the situation in Israel, in Gaza, in the Middle East, will not stop them from supporting Ukraine against the Russian invaders, making it very clear, particularly for those Eastern European, Central European countries, that Russia's invasion is an existential threat, not just to Ukraine, but also to Europe. And so those leaders will continue to stand by Ukraine.
Okay. And I believe issues related to migration and EU's economic competitiveness were also taken up. How are these being addressed?
Yeah, certainly migration is a crucial issue that has been discussed, but it has not had any formal decisions made. Now, it is an issue that is almost as contentious, if not more contentious, than the situation in the Middle East among EU leaders. That has been a crucial topic. The last time we were here at the European Council, there was a disagreement between those leaders. The first day went on until nearly 3 o'clock in the morning before an agreement was reached, or in that sense, they agreed to disagree and to go back to the drawing board and try to continue negotiating on migration. That was certainly an issue that was discussed, but a little bit more briefly at this particular council, because no formal decisions or agreements were expected to be reached. It was certainly discussed, as was the long-term budget and as was the EU economy. The European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde was here with the EU leaders. The ECB yesterday deciding not to raise interest rates as well. There is a real concern that the EU's economic performance, that GDP, that growth, may not be positive in the next few months, in the next few quarters. So really concerned that those leaders want to make sure they can boost economic growth in the EU. But as you can imagine, you have the Middle East, migration, the EU economy, and all these topics on the agenda. It has been a very busy day for the EU leaders.
Certainly. Well, thanks for that update, Alex Kadia, joining us from Brussels. Now, the United States has criticized Hamas delegation's visit to Russia. White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby in a media briefing said this is not the time to support Hamas.
Our message to any other nation around the world is this is not a time to be supporting Hamas's ability to continue to kill Israelis, and it's certainly not a time, or any nation out there that wants to be involved should look for ways to be involved to help Israel defend itself and to help get humanitarian assistance in. So we'll see what comes of the conversation.
The Kremlin has ruled out any risk of Russia being drawn into the conflict after U.S. fighter jets on Friday struck weapons and ammunition facilities in Syria in retaliation for attacks on U.S. forces in Iranian-backed militia. Kremlin added that the U.S. strikes would further stoke tensions across the region. TASS news agency reported on Friday that another senior member of the Hamas delegation visiting Moscow, Abi Marzouk, had held talks with Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Ali Bagheri Kani, who's also visiting the Russian capital. The two discussed efforts to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and deliver humanitarian aid to its residents. And Bagheri Kani also reaffirmed Tehran's strong support for the Palestinian cause, TASS said, citing Iranian embassy sources in Moscow. Meanwhile, Russia defended its decision to invite a Hamas delegation to Moscow against strong Israeli criticism, saying it was necessary to maintain contacts with all sides in the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Earlier, the US military launched airstrikes early Friday on 2 locations in eastern Syria linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps and affiliated groups. The Pentagon said these precision self-defense strikes are a response to a series of ongoing and mostly unsuccessful attacks against US personnel in Iraq and Syria by militia groups that began on the 17th of October. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is on a visit to the United States. The Chinese minister has called for joint efforts from China and the United States to bring bilateral relations to the track of healthy, stable and sustainable growth. Wang made the remarks when he and the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken briefly appeared in front of the media before they held a meeting in Washington, D.C. and expressed hope for constructive and forward-looking talks. Chinese Foreign Minister is on a 3-day visit to Washington, D.C., the latest in a flurry of diplomatic engagements between the 2 strategic rivals as they seek to manage their differences to avoid conflict. The trip primarily is to prepare for an expected summit between US President Joe Biden and the Chinese President Xi Jinping in November. Let me now take you across to Nick Harper, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Good evening, Nick. This has been a long pending visit after the flurry of US secretaries visiting China. Wang has already met Blinken. Is a White House meeting with President Biden also on the cards?
It got a busy couple of days for Wang Yi here in Washington, D.C. Looking at the president's schedule for today, nothing official in terms of a meeting with China's foreign minister. However, it is something that's been talked about. We know that Wang Yi will be in and around the White House, so there is a possibility for some sort of a meeting. It just depends on whether or not that meeting is public and how extensive it is. It could be what's often termed as a pull-aside, where quite simply the 2 men say a quick hello but don't get into any of the specifics that, of course, Wang Yi is talking about with Antony Blinken. And as you mentioned, yes, we've seen an incredible flurry of activity from a diplomatic point of view over recent months. Many US officials heading to China. Antony Blinken has gone there. The climate envoy, John Kerry, the trade representative, Gina Raimondo, and also the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen. They've all made visits to Beijing over the course of the last 6 months, which is quite a change from where relations were at in January and February this year. You may remember that at the beginning of February, the US shot down a spy balloon that was traveling across the United States. That really caused a real rift in relations that were already rocky and led to the postponement of Antony Blinken's trip to Beijing. Things now seem to be on a slightly calmer course, and as you mentioned, all of this potentially preparing the ground for a meeting between Biden and Xi at the APEC summit in San Francisco in just a couple of weeks' time. No official word yet that Xi will be coming to the US for that, but if it happens, it'll be the first meeting between these 2 world leaders in almost a year.
Yes, that'll be quite an event, won't it? Thanks for joining us for the moment, Nick, from Washington, D.C. Let's now take you across also to my colleague Amritpal Singh, joining us from the West Bank for the latest on what's really happening as far as the Israel-Hamas conflict is concerned. Amrit, there's mounting pressure from domestic and international quarters on Benjamin Netanyahu's government for a pause or a ceasefire. The UN is saying the humanitarian situation is appalling. What are the Israelis thinking?
The Israelis are saying they will not stop their military campaign till they achieve their objective of completely decimating Hamas. And they are saying it and they are affecting it on the ground. We saw last night consecutive, for the second consecutive day, a localized raid or a limited raid, ground assault being done into the Gaza Strip, attacking targets just outside the Gaza city. That's in northern Gaza. They've hit targets targets in southern Gaza and central Gaza. A column of the infantry and went in along with, backed by Israeli jets and drones. The Israeli army claims, or the Israeli Defense Forces claim, they destroyed multiple bases and operational bases of the Hamas, as many anti-tank missile launch posts there. And they also claim they killed a Hamas commander in last night's raids. And then they exited within a couple of hours. The Hamas has alleged, there's a statement just come in from the Hamas saying they have attempted a beach landing. So, what the defense minister said yesterday, they will attack by sea, by air, through the land. So they seem to be affecting that, but in a more calibrated fashion, not what was being anticipated, a full on, the army which has been amassed on the borders with the Gaza Strip, with the tanks and artillery fire and heavy machinery, military machinery going in once and for all, but going step by step in a calibrated manner. So despite international pressure, Gautam, to answer your question, the Israelis are not letting up. They're telling the Westerners, or anybody telling them, including the UN, that give a humanitarian pause. They're saying as much aid as possible is going in, and that's the most we will do.
Right. I don't know, there's domestic pressure as well. 2 ministers of the Netanyahu government have resigned, and there's a survey that is being talked about a lot, where 50% of the people are saying that there should be a ceasefire in the interest of the hostages. But each day, Amrit, of the fighting brings more concern for the hostages. Their numbers also keep going up. Now it's 229. It also enhances the danger of the conflict spreading to other parts of the Middle East. Now, will the efforts to stop that from happening really bear fruit?
The threat of the conflict spiraling remains huge. In fact, to a certain extent, it's already, got out of hand with them attacking targets in Syria, in Lebanon, with the Hezbollah fighting back. They attacking West Bank, where I am, and I'm in a place called Bethel. It's not very far from Ramallah, where, it's close to a place called Jenin, where targets were hit. So it is spilling over outside the Gaza Strip, clearly. And though not at the level, it is happening, the military exchanges that are happening, or the military campaign happening in Gaza. So the spillover threat remains. The Americans pounded targets in Syria, saying they were Iranian-backed targets there. So the threat of state actors, non-state actors joining in still remains very high. The Hezbollah has again issued a warning saying, if you go in, we will jump in and we will attack Israel full-fledgedly. The delegation of Hamas, which was in Russia yesterday, made it clear that unless they cease fire, they will not let the hostages go. Today, a very disturbing statement came from the Hamas. They said over 7,000 people have been killed, and 50 in Israeli strikes, and 50 of them are hostages. Now, we can't vouch for the veracity of the statement, because there's a lot of information warfare, shadow boxing going on as well. But if that is to be true, and if Hamas were to be believed, we don't know what the situation in terms of the hostages is, because till a couple of hours back, before the statement came, we were hearing reports that emanating out of Doha, saying that negotiations are at advanced stages, and one could expect some forward movement on that. But this is a disturbing news if 50 of the hostages have been killed. As they allege in Israeli strikes, Israel says we are investigating. They say if they would have been killed, they would have been killed by Hamas. So there are conflicting reports coming in from both sides, but both on the hostage situation, only 4 have been released so far. That remains grim. The spillover apprehension or threat looms large here. Gautam.
Definitely. I mean, the death toll is climbing every day. New figures keep coming in. In Gaza now, it's being said more than 7,200 people are dead, and some figures have been received by WHO as well, saying 1,000 people could be, these are estimates, could be just buried in the rubble all over Gaza. Let's see what happens next, Amrit. We're waiting to hear what happens in the UNGA as well. Thanks for joining us for the time being. Now, 68-year-old China's former Premier Li Keqiang died of a sudden heart attack. Li Keqiang, while resting in Shanghai in recent days, experienced a sudden heart attack on the 26th of October, which was yesterday, and after all-out efforts to revive him failed. He died in Shanghai at 10 minutes past midnight on the 27th of October, which is today, Friday. The state broadcaster CCTV reported the death. The former Chinese premier and head of China's cabinet served under President Xi Jinping for a decade from 2013, retiring in March. The elite Peking University-educated economist was once viewed as a top Communist Party leadership contender, but became increasingly sidelined by Xi in recent years. He memorably said in 2020 that over 600 million people in China earned less than the equivalent of $140 per month, sparking a wider debate on poverty and income inequality in that country. And still to come up on DD India News Hour, an intense manhunt is being carried out for more than the last 36 hours for the shooter who left at least 18 people dead in a Maine town in the US. Category 5 Hurricane Otis leaves behind a trail of destruction and at least 27 people having been killed in Mexico's Acapulco. And India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurates Asia's largest telecom, media and tech forum, Indian Mobile Congress in Delhi.
ISRO women luminaries are going to share their experiences, their stories.
How to become a scientist, how to do what to do for the future. They're thinking about all those things.
Sky is not the limit, that is what we have proven now. Now we have to go beyond the sky.
Develop our curiosity. Try to learn the science from the nature.
With the Gaganyaan mission and the upcoming future missions to Mars landing and other things, your people's interaction is really required.
ISRO women luminaries are going to share their experiences, their stories.
How to become a scientist, how to do what to do for the future. They're thinking about all those things.
Sky is not the limit, that is what we have proven now. Now we have to go beyond the sky.
Develop our curiosity. Try to learn the science from the nature.
With the Gaganyaan mission and the upcoming future missions to Mars landing and other things, your people's interaction is really required.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy. And before, in fact, Russia-controlled Donetsk city is constantly being targeted with fresh Ukrainian shelling. Russia has reported that according to preliminary data from operational services, the shelling was carried out by using cluster munitions. The city of Donetsk has been under Russian control since 2014, but Ukrainian troops continue to hold positions on its outskirts and it regularly comes under artillery fire. Donetsk is one of 4 regions of Ukraine that Russia partly occupies and claims as its own territory last year in a move condemned as illegal by most members of the United Nations. Ukraine has denied reports of suspension of the new Black Sea export corridor. A British firm claimed earlier that Ukraine had suspended use of the corridor due to a possible threat from Russian warplanes and sea mines. Ukraine has been using the corridor to try to revive its exports without Russian approval, defying threats from Moscow that quit a UN brokered deal in July that had allowed some food exports to flow despite the war. Now, European Union leaders have expressed their unwavering support towards Ukraine during the summit in Brussels. Leaders held talks on ongoing support for Ukraine, with broad support for a €50 billion plan over the next 5 years, despite Hungary and Slovakia expressing concerns. The EU and its member countries have provided billions of euros in assistance to Ukraine since Russian forces invaded it in February last year.
If we don't help Ukraine, then what is the alternative? Really, I mean, Russia wins, and so what happens next? Why do you think that you're safe then when we give away Ukraine and don't support them right now? So that is a question that is actually unanswered by them. So I think we have to, talk further.
We have a very strong view that Ukraine has a right to defend its sovereignty, its independence, its democracy. It's by no means a perfect country, and there are and have been issues and problems around corruption, for example. But this is a war of aggression. Russia has invaded, an unprovoked invasion, is trying to take over all or part of that country. If we don't stop Putin in Ukraine, he won't stop there. So it is a threat to all of us.
Meanwhile, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is still adamant on his point on EU support to Ukraine and said that European Union strategy with regard to the war in Ukraine has failed and the bloc should create a plan B as the Ukrainians will not win on the front line. On the sidelines of the EU summit, he said there was a big battle, especially over support for Ukraine, and sees no reason for Hungary to send its taxpayers' money to Ukraine. Now, over in the US, a manhunt is continuing in the state of Maine after a gunman killed 18 people and injured another 13. Authorities have released pictures of a man carrying an assault rifle entering two establishments where he opened fire. Our US correspondent Nick Harper sends us this report.
An unsettling, unnerving day during which much of southern Maine was under lockdown. People barricaded in their homes in fear of what might happen next. Schools and businesses, many of them closed for the day, while police searched for the suspect. That suspect, 40-year-old Robert Card, seen in a bowling alley and restaurant with an assault rifle. Police releasing those pictures soon after the shootings took place on Wednesday night. Maine's Governor, Janet Mills, spoke about the profound sadness that the community was dealing with. She said that the city of Lewiston, where these shootings unfolded, did not deserve that terrible assault. Now, Maine is a state of about 1.3 million people. It's considered one of the safer states in the United States. But attention is now turning to issues of mental health and gun control. Robert Card was reportedly a gun instructor, but also had known mental health issues, raising questions about how he was able to own a firearm, which is leading the White House to call for a ban on assault weapons. There was a 10-year ban that was in place until it lapsed in 2004 and hasn't been reinstated since then. President Biden, during his time in office, has been calling for a ban on assault weapons. We heard that again from the White House podium. The press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, saying that the president wanted that ban to be in place. But to do so, it must pass through Congress, and many Republicans there argue that the right to bear arms is a constitutional right and not something that should be dictated to them by the White House. So far, there have been at least 565 mass shooting incidents in the US this year. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
Now, at least 27 people are dead after Hurricane Otis battered the Mexican beach resort town of Acapulco. The Category 5 storm has left a trail of wreckage across Acapulco, causing damage running into billions of dollars. Rahul Singh reports for DD India.
These visuals describe the disaster after a powerful hurricane rocked the Mexican city of Acapulco on Wednesday. The satellite images released on Thursday shows the devastating destruction. Hurricane Otis flooded streets, ripped roofs off homes and hotels, leaving a trail of wreckage across the city of nearly 900,000. The survivors are thanking their stars.
Totalmente.
I was shocked, Barbara, who was the person I went to Acapulco with that time. Well, we were working before and we saw that we began to feel that the air was rising. It was already a feeling of panic. We began to be very, very, very afraid. I think we are very lucky to be alive. The hurricane wrecked the coastal city whose economy depends heavily on tourism. One of the most powerful storms to hit Mexico, Hurricane Otis, ripped through Acapulco with wind speeds of 165 miles per hour.
After a couple of minutes of shaking the door, I was able to open it. I walk into the hallway, I go to the living room, and I literally see the couch going out the window. And I was in shock, and I was barefooted. There was glass everywhere. The wind was so powerful, so intense, and I realized that this is a real hurricane.
On Thursday, local residents complained of shortage of gasoline as they gathered around a gas station. The guys from the gas station have a power plant, but they don't want to turn it on because the people of the Electricity Federal Commission are not here. Acapulco is the biggest city in the southern state of Guerrero. Guerrero State Governor Evelyn Salgado said 80% of the city's hotels had been hit by the storm and that authorities were working to restore electricity and reactivate drinking water pumps. Nearly 8,400 members of Mexico's Army, Air Force and National Guard have been deployed in and near Acapulco to assist in cleanup efforts.
In Pakistan, a court has denied bail to detained former Prime Minister Imran Khan in a case in which he's been indicted on charges of leaking state secrets. The charge is related to a classified cable sent to Islamabad by Pakistan's ambassador in the United States last year, which Imran Khan is accused of making public. The former cricket star denies and says that the contents of the cable appeared in the media from some other source. Khan's lawyer says that Islamabad High Court declined Khan's application for bail and for the case to be dismissed. Now, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has inaugurated the 7th edition of the India Mobile Congress in capital New Delhi. The IMC is Asia's largest telecom, media and technology forum. Prime Minister Modi also virtually unveiled 100 5G use case labs across educational institutions in the country. The labs are part of an initiative for development of 5G applications that will cater to both domestic and global demands. Addressing the event, Prime Minister Modi said that India will lead the world in 6G technology. He added that India currently has over 100,000 startups in comparison to just a few hundred startups before 2014.
वो तारीख नहीं है, एक बदलाव है। 2014 के पहले भारत के पास कुछ 100 स्टार्टअप थे, कुछ 100, लेकिन अब ये संख्या 1 लाख के आसपास पहुंच गई है। इस पड़ाव पर हमें ये भी याद रखना होगा कि हम कितना बड़ा परिवर्तन करते हैं। हम हर क्षेत्र में पावर ऑफ डेमोक्रेटाइजेशन पर विश्वास करते हैं। भारत में विकास का लाभ हर वर्ग, हर क्षेत्र तक पहुंचे। भारत में संसाधनों का सभी को लाभ मिले, सभी को सम्मानजनक जीवन मिले और सभी तक टेक्नोलॉजी का फायदा पहुंचे। इस दिशा में हम तेजी से काम कर रहे हैं और मेरे लिए यही सबसे बड़ा सामाजिक न्याय है।
Addressing the India Mobile Congress, Bharti Enterprises Chairperson Sunil Bharti Mittal said that India's digital public infrastructure is the talk of the town across the world. Listen in.
जहाँ से भी मैं दुनिया में लोगों को मिलता हूँ, सब में एक ही बात है कि इंडिया ने अपने आप को डिजिटली कन्वर्ट कैसे किया। ये डिजिटल पब्लिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर जो है, इसको इंडिया से लिफ्ट करके हम अपनी कंट्रीज़ में कैसे शिफ्ट करें, कंट्री आफ्टर कंट्री, वेदर इट इज़ वर्ल्ड बैंक, यूनाइटेड नेशंस, WTO, अफ्रीका यूनियन, यूरोपियन यूनियन, G20, OECD कंट्रीज, ब्रिक्स, एक ही नारा लग रहा है हर जगह, digital infrastructure that India has built can accelerate the world economy, especially in those countries which have lack of infrastructure.
India's Prime Minister, like we said, Narendra Modi inaugurated the 7th edition of the India Mobile Congress in New Delhi. The IMC, as it is called, is the largest telecom, media and technology forum in Asia and is being held from the 27th to 29th of October. The event is a platform to highlight India's incredible advancements in telecommunications and technology and provide an opportunity for startups to display their innovative products and solutions. DD India's Meghnad Dev has spoken with India's Minister for Communications, Ashwini Vaishnav, for more.
India's Minister of Communication, Ashwini Vaishnav. Thank you so much, sir, for talking to DD News. First of all, this is the 7th edition of India Mobile Congress. You have been going around the exhibition, you have been going around different exhibits. What's the sense that you pick up?
There's huge enthusiasm. There are more than 50 countries from which participants have come here. Universities have come here, manufacturers have come here, designers have come here. The whole telecom sector has transformed in the last 9.5 years. If you look back 10 years, telecom sector was mired with controversies. The way the government was kind of treating this sector was really disheartening. Today, the telecom sector is a sunrise sector. We are seeing fresh investment. We are seeing a lot of enthusiasm from designers. India has emerged as a major manufacturing hub for telecom equipment. Today, designed in India, made in India, telecom equipment are exported to 70 plus countries. In mobile manufacturing, India has emerged as the second largest hub in the entire world. The way Prime Minister Modi ji has transformed telecom sector, it has really emerged as a sunrise industry.
So when we are talking about manufacturing, obviously we are talking about the sector of semiconductors, and today we are not only talking about manufacturing for India but globally. So do you think scale is a challenge when we're talking about the sector?
Scale has become really big in the country because one, very large telecom deployment has happened. Second, a large pool of talent is available. Third, apart from the domestic market, the opportunities available all over the world are today available to us because India is today placed as a trusted value chain partner. So everybody wants to come to India, manufacture in India, design in India and export to the world. That's the kind of transformation which has happened in Indian economy, and that is creating new opportunities for all of us.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visionary PLI scheme has already propelled India into becoming a trusted and major hub for smartphone manufacturing and exports. India's Minister of State for Electronics and Information Technology, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, in a tweet, lauded the scheme, talking about the fact that within just 2.5 years, Tata companies will now start making iPhones for India for domestic and global markets from India. The minister congratulated the Tata team for taking over Wistron operations. The minister thanked Wistron for their contributions and great going for Apple in building a global supply chain from India with Indian companies at its helm. The minister reiterated the government's commitment and said in a tweet that the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology stands fully in support in growth of global Indian electronics companies that will in turn to support global electronic brands that want to make India their trusted manufacturing and talent partner and to realize the PM's goal of making India a global electronics power. Now, India has used its digital revolution to power up its payments infrastructure in a manner the world has never seen. The world has been left in complete awe of this prowess, and the spin-off benefits and potential is being seen as an immense one as experts and global agencies have deliberated it. Take a look.
The Government of India is committed to expanding digital transactions in the Indian economy. IT is aimed at digitizing the economy with consequent benefits of efficiency, transparency and quality. India is being discussed on the global stage. JP Morgan has elevated India to overweight rating, including 3 stocks in its EM portfolio. This upgrade aligns JP Morgan with other prominent global brokerages like Morgan Stanley, CLSA and Nomura, who have also pushed India to an overweight status. India's instant payment system has proved to be a game changer. UPI has not only been used domestically but is also being hailed worldwide. US Treasury has praised UPI for cross-border payment leadership. The UPI stands out in advancing bilateral links between other countries including Singapore and the UAE. Referring to India, Shambag said that some jurisdictions with strong bilateral economic relationships are going further and interlinking their fast payment systems. He added that UPI also enables settlements of payments across networks. Shambag also hailed the G20 payments roadmap, saying that it has channeled efforts for near-term growth. Falling in line with this commitment, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched a microcredit scheme for urban street vendors, known as PM Swanidhi scheme in 2020, which has a phenomenal impact by ensuring inclusive entrepreneurship. India's central bank, SBI, also analyzed that transformative impact on PM Swanidhi. As per the SBI report, PM Swanidhi has ensured inclusive entrepreneurship. PM Swanidhi has seamlessly connected marginalized urban micro-entrepreneurs. Almost 75% of loan beneficiaries come from non-general category. OBCs account for 44% of total disbursement, while SC/STs account for 22%. 43% of total beneficiaries are women. The female share indicates empowerment of entrepreneurial capabilities of urban females.
So I think this Prime Minister Swanidhi scheme, which was launched during the COVID time, is a very interesting proposition because it incentivizes the entire structure of loan taking and loan repaying, because if you pay the first loan, you get double the amount of the second loan. If you pay the second loan, you get 2.5 times that of the second loan. So in effect, actually, what is happening is that we can see that the ratio of those people who are actually taking the second loan out of the first loan and the third and the second loan is actually progressively going up. This means that people are very conscious of having a better credit history so that they can get integrated into the banking system.
With expanding consumer market and a large industrial sector, the Indian economy is set to surpass Japan by 2030. As per the S&P Global Market Intelligence, India will continue to be one of the world's fastest growing economies over the next decade. Moreover, India is a favorable place for important long-term growth markets in a wide range of industries, including manufacturing sectors such as autos, electronics and chemicals. The IMF in October 2023 also revised India's growth estimate to 6.3% in 2024 due to resilient domestic demand and strong investment inflows.
The growth rate that they see now and projections of the growth rate that they see for the next 5-6 years, and that's saying quite a lot, is more or less very stable. In the world economy now, it's very difficult to get any large-sized economy where the growth rate is going to be so stable. That is what is attracting investors.
Foreign delegates who arrived in India during the G20 summit this year were equally amazed by the use of UPI. Not only the World Bank, but also the German embassy in India, in a tweet, lauded India's digital infrastructure and said that the minister was very fascinated by the transaction experience.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar in a tweet has said that he had a good conversation with the Omani Foreign Minister Badr Busaidi. Both of them discussed bilateral relations and exchanged views on the crisis in West Asia. The average gross total income for individual taxpayers in India has risen by 56%. Union Finance Ministry on Thursday said that India's average gross total income for individual taxpayers increased from about 4.5 lakh rupees in assessment year 2013-14 to nearly 7 lakh rupees in the assessment year 2021-22, which is a 56% rise in 8 years. There's also been a 90% jump in the number of people filing income tax returns during this period, indicating rising income and widening of the tax base. The Government of India has launched a campaign, Meri Mati Mera Desh. It envisions a unified celebration of India's soil and valor, commemorating the nation's journey of freedom and progress. By connecting with the land and honoring the country's heroes, This program instills a sense of national pride and inspires future generations to protect India's cherished heritage. This campaign comprises many activities and ceremonies conducted across the country. Delhi Lieutenant Governor V.K. Saxena, as part of this campaign, has announced setting up of Amrit Vatika, which will be a symbol of unity near the National War Memorial. The initiative saw the LG sending 11 earthen pots containing Delhi's soil to the National War Memorial.
यह अभियान भारत के लिए अपना सर्वस्व निछावर करने वाले वीर जवानों को समर्पित है। यह अभियान हमारे माननीय प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के विजन का परिणाम है। यह हमारे महान राष्ट्र की विविधता को दर्शाने के साथ साथ हमारे वीर जवानों की महान शौर्य गाथा से भी हमारा परिचय करा रहा है। यह अभियान हमारे गांवों और शहरों में रची बसी हमारी माटी की महक को व आसपास के लोगों को एक साथ जोड़ने का भी कार्य कर रहा है।
And now in sports, Indian athletes have continued to excel at the ongoing 4th Asian Para Games. As the event comes down to close, India is one step closer to touching the 100 medals mark. India is currently at number 6 with 99 medals, including 25 golds, 29 silvers and 45 bronzes. Earlier today, Sheetal Devi kicked off Friday in the ongoing 4th Asian Para Games on a remarkable note as she bagged the coveted gold medal in the women's compound open event. Sheetal Devi, with a scintillating display in archery, defeated Singapore's Alim Noor Siahida in the women's compound open event. In the men's 1500-meter T38 final race, India's Raman Sharma succeeded in winning the gold medal by securing the first position. Raman won the gold medal with an Asian record time 4 minutes 20.80 seconds. In badminton, India won gold and silver medals in men's singles SL3 category. In the finals, India's Pramod Bhagat won the gold medal by defeating Nitesh Kumar of his own country. Pramod won the match in a tough fight by 22-20, 18-21 and 21-19. And that's all we have in this edition of DD India News Hour. But do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news and updates as they break here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.